Revenge films.
This story is about the time that I divorced my husband. He was emotionally abusive and didn't treat me well at all. My husband and I lived about 10 minutes from his parents, and his mother would come see us every day and bully me. She made my life hell. When we were newlyweds, my mother-in-law wasn't so awful. Her attitude towards me changed after we moved to the same neighborhood as her. I didn't understand why she had to be so mean to me. I asked my husband for some advice, but he was completely useless.
She doesn't mean anything by it. Don't let her get to you.
So I got up the courage to ask my mother-in-law not to come over to our house every day. But she wouldn't listen. I was mad at my husband for giving her our spare key, which meant that she could come over whenever she wanted to. Sometimes I would come home from the supermarket to find her relaxing in our living room. Please let me know in advance when you're coming over here. It makes me very uncomfortable that you show up unannounced each time. We're family. Why can't I come over whenever I want to? My mother-in-law wasn't making any sense to me. To my horror, my mother-in-law showed me that she had set up hidden cameras in our living room. She had been filming my every move. This is an invasion of our privacy. How could you do such a thing? Even if we're family, this is unacceptable. If you have nothing to hide, you wouldn't care about the camera. I bet you're having an affair. I have everything on camera, so you can't deny any of it. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I had a very bad feeling about all of it. Why do you think I'm having an affair? Don't try to deny it. My son told me the truth. That's why I'm looking out for him. Why would my husband say such a thing? That's not true at all. I couldn't understand why my husband would lie about something like this. My mother-in-law told me that she changed her attitude towards me after she suspected that I was having an affair. She went out of her way to set up hidden cameras in our living room to keep a close eye on my moves. I'm not having an affair. You'll see if you check the footage on the camera. I have nothing to hide. My mother-in-law began to doubt herself because I was overly confident. But my son said that. I needed to talk to my husband. I don't know why he thinks that I'm cheating on him. My mother-in-law began to check the footage on the camera. I was going to get my husband to explain the situation to both me and his mother to clear this all up. I called my parents-in-law over for dinner so we could all sit down and talk about it. When my husband came home, I asked him to explain what was going on.
What's this camera for?
Your mother thought that I was having an affair because that's what you told her, and she set up this camera in our living room to gather evidence.
Why in the world would you go that far? You're invading their privacy. I was wondering why you were visiting this house every day. I had no idea that you were being so ridiculous.
But our son told me that she was having an affair. I had to do something.
Mom! I never said that! And I didn't give you permission to set up a hidden camera in our house! What were you thinking? There's no need to check the footage on that camera.
He seemed nervous for some reason. Let's look at this together to make sure that there are no misunderstandings. I want everyone here to know that I'm not having an affair. When I played the video, we were all surprised. The video showed footage of my husband naked with another woman in our living room. He was the one having an affair, not me. My husband became very pale after we saw the video. I was shocked to see who the woman was in the video. That's your brother's wife. What are you two doing?
This is not what it looks like! We saw the video. You can't deny it. That is definitely your brother's wife, Karen.
My father-in-law punched my husband in the face and my husband hit his head on the wall. My husband works in sales and he gets to set his own hours. I go to yoga and art classes every day, so I leave the house for a few hours a day. My husband and Karen must have been seeing each other at the house when no one was around. It makes me sick to think that they had done this in our living room couch. My husband finally confessed that he was in a relationship with Karen before we got married. My father-in-law was furious, and he called his son over and his wife Karen over to the house. After that, it was pure chaos. My husband's brother was livid and beat his little brother up. My mother-in-law was upset with her son and her daughter-in-law for their betrayal. She pulled hard on Karen's hair until Karen screamed in pain. In the end, everyone got down on their knees and apologized to me and my husband's brother. My mother-in-law felt bad for accusing me and bullying me. She apologized to me profusely. She couldn't forgive my husband for lying to her and told him that she could never trust him again. I can't believe that you tried to blame your wife for something you did. What were you thinking? You made me think that Emily was the bad one. You're not my son anymore. I'm cutting all ties with you. She then slapped him in the face several times. After that, my husband and I got divorced. I had no intention of forgiving him for what he did to me. My husband's brother felt the same way, and he divorced Karen as well.
I'm leaving you! I regret marrying you in the first place! I can't believe that you were cheating on me with my little brother! How could you do this to me?
My brother-in-law was a catch. He wasn't all that good looking, but he had a lot of money. That's why Karen was reluctant to divorce him. She explained to him that her affair with his brother was a fling and she didn't mean anything to her. She told him that he was the love of her life. Her husband didn't listen to her though, and after divorcing her, asked for a huge amount of alimony.
Why do I have to pay?
She was completely clueless and didn't seem to understand the gravity of her crimes. She wasn't very smart, and she assumed that it was always the wife that got alimony in a divorce settlement. My brother-in-law's lawyer explained that it was the spouse at fault that had to pay the alimony.
If it's going to cost me so much money, I'm not divorcing you. Let's get back together.
I also asked for payment from my husband and Karen.
Mom! Why did you set up that stupid camera in our living room? This is all your fault!
After saying something so stupid, his mother and brother just beat him up. My mother-in-law continued to apologize to me. She felt really bad for the way that she had treated me. At the time, I was upset with her, but I decided to forgive her in the end. After all, her son had lied to her. In the end, my husband's company found out about the affair and he was fired from his job. My husband had only gotten that job because his older brother had referred him, but without his brother's support, he could no longer stay in that position. My husband's brother had a very successful career, and if the company had to choose between him or my husband, it would be my husband that had to go. My husband had a difficult time getting a new job because practically everyone knew that his brother and the companies were reluctant to hire him. He had a ton of job interviews, but none of them led to anything promising. Oh well, he's not my problem anymore. Karen's parents were extremely upset with their daughter. They couldn't forgive her for ruining the marriage and having an affair with her husband's little brother.
What were you thinking? You had a great husband, but you had to ruin it all. I'm so ashamed of you.
Her parents covered the money that she owed to me and her husband, but she had to pay them back. She got a full-time job and worked long hours to pay back her parents. After my divorce, I bumped into my mother-in-law. She was with her grandchild, the daughter of her older son and Karen. My husband and I didn't have any children, but my husband's little brother and Karen did. We decided to get some coffee and catch up. She felt bad about the way she had treated me and told me that she was trying to be a better person. She was taking good care of her grandchild and wanted the best for her. She knew that it wasn't easy for a child when their parents were divorced. Karen gave up custody of her daughter, and her husband got sole custody. My mother-in-law promised to support her older son in raising his daughter. She knew how busy he was with work, and it wasn't easy being a single father.
I'm really sorry for the way that I treated you. I feel so bad. I do hope that over time you'll be able to forgive me.
I told her that time had resolved the issue and that I no longer had any hard feelings. You can forget about that now. It's all in the past. After that, I moved out of town and never saw my mother-in-law again. I hoped that everyone that had been hurt by my husband and Karen had peaceful and happy lives. My name is Melissa. I live with my husband, Richard, and our two sons who are in elementary school. Our oldest son, Henry, is 10 years old, and he's a very active little kid. However, our second son, Thomas, was born with an incurable disease, and we were told that he wouldn't make it past 5 years old. And even though we are in and out of the hospital, he was fighting really hard against his disease. Because of the stress, I also fell ill about 2 years ago, and every day was a struggle to get by. After receiving treatment, my health slowly started to recover, and 2 years later, I was finally healed. But just as I was getting better, Thomas passed away at 8 years old. Even though I was devastated, I knew that we had to get through it together as a family. And after the funeral, I desperately held back my tears so that we could try to regain a normal life. However, at the time, my husband, who was always very mild-mannered, suddenly changed into a different person, and he started saying things that made me doubt my ears.
I'm home!
Welcome home, honey.
You were home all day again today? How long are you going to be a full-time housewife for? You're like a parasite around here.
What did you just say?
You don't even work, and you just laze about the house all day. So I asked if you're a parasite.
How could you? You were the one that told me that I could be a full-time housewife so that I could take care of Thomas. Have you forgotten already?
Well, that baggage is finally gone, so hurry up and get to work already.
Package? That's what you were thinking of our Thomas?
Obviously! I wish we didn't have that troublesome kid who cost us so much money.
How would you? Tell me you're joking! Tell me that you don't really think that! This was our precious child, wasn't it? And you loved him so much! How could you say that out of nowhere?
Shut up! I'm also exhausted!
I was so shocked by my husband, who changed the moment that our youngest son passed away, and I thought I was going to go crazy from anger. But then, as if to rub salt into the wound, it only got worse. One day, my husband suddenly told me that he wanted to get a divorce. Not only that, he said that he was going to collect a settlement fee from me for neglecting the chores and abusing our children. It was true that when I fell ill, there was a time that I couldn't do anything around the house, but I never once abused our children in any way. After being served divorce papers for a reason that I had no memory of course I couldn't accept it. Wait a minute, I abused the children? What are you talking about?
You were forcing Henry to study all the time, weren't you? That's emotional abuse, isn't it? I hope you don't think a mother like that could ever gain custody. And don't forget that you were sick and unemployed, and that you're clearly at a disadvantage.
When I saw his evil face, he laughed at me. I realized that the devil really did exist in this world. From here, my husband started leaving the house at night more frequently.
If you leave the house while I'm not here, and leave our kid unattended, I hope you know you're just gonna be at even more of a disadvantage.
It was almost as though he was threatening me. Even if I asked where he was going, my husband would just say,
"That's none of your business."
And he would never try to tell me the truth. After claiming a divorce out of nowhere and then leaving the house at night all the time, I suspected my husband of having an affair. I wanted to do whatever it took to find some evidence, and then I asked my friend from high school, Nancy, for some help. When I explained the situation to her, Nancy was furious with my husband, and she said that she would do whatever it took to help me find evidence against him. I was relieved to have her on my side. The next time my husband left the house, I called Nancy and I asked her to follow him. Because I couldn't leave the house with our child, she took my place to get photos and videos by secretly following after him. When she came back, there was Richard going in and out of a hotel with a woman that I had seen before. That woman was my husband's colleague, whom I met at a company barbecue in the past. And she was a once-divorced single mother. Even though there were videos of them going into the hotel together, I didn't think that it was enough evidence, so I decided that I shouldn't give up there and chased after videos that would secure the affair. A few days after that, on his day off, my husband left the house in the afternoon, and that day my son was going camping with his friend's family, so I was home alone for the first time in a while. I thought it might be an opportunity to follow my husband, but it had already been over an hour since he left the house, so I gave up. But then, at that moment, I got a phone call from Nancy.
Hello? I just happened to see your husband's car by coincidence, but that woman is riding in the passenger seat. What do you want to do? Should I follow them?
What? Where are you right now? I'm home alone right now, so I'll head right over there. I hopped in my car and headed straight to the location that Nancy sent me. When I followed the GPS in my car, I got to a parking lot deep into the mountains where I didn't see any other people there. I found Nancy's car parked, but I didn't see my husband's car anywhere. Nancy jumped out of her car, and in a panic, she came running over to me. I followed her deeper into the mountain, and that's where I saw Richard's car. The car was shaking and making noise, and from inside, we could hear the unmistakable sounds of a man and a woman. We approached the car without getting noticed and managed to get a video inside of the car. On the screen was my husband and his cheating partner naked and all over each other. Once we succeeded in getting the videos, we rushed back to our cars and headed towards the cafe. There, we confirmed that we had crystal clear evidence, and we celebrated that we finally got definitive evidence. Richard, who didn't know anything, started a trial of custody for Henry, and without telling him that I knew about his affair, I agreed. In court, my husband put on an act that I had neglected my chores and abused the children, and that he was trying to collect a settlement fee from me of $30,000. At that moment, I presented the video of him and a woman having intercourse in the car as evidence of his affair, and my husband froze with his jaw on the ground. I, in turn, said that I was suing him for $30,000, and now my husband was at a disadvantage. He started to panic.
What is this video? Did you take this?
Yeah? Why? Did you think that I hadn't noticed that you were cheating on me?
If I knew that you had that footage, I never would have started this trial. Did you set me up?
All I did was present the truth, that's all. By the way, I also sent the footage to your company already.
You're lying, right? What have you done?
In the end, because the affair was obvious, I was able to gain full custody of Henry. My husband was ordered to pay a settlement fee and child support fees to me. When I told Nancy, she was so happy for me, as if it were her own trial. After that, I sent the woman the footage and gave her a call. It turned out that the woman and my husband were planning on living together with both of their kids, and that she had already bought a house. After the divorce, she didn't want Richard to interact with me, and they came up with this plan for me to not be able to see Henry anymore. For that reason, she tried to make me lose custody of Henry. It was so selfish, and of course I couldn't forgive her for it, so I sued her too. But when I sued her, the woman said that she was going to marry my husband and that they would pay it together, and she seemed very confident in court. However, because my husband initiated the trial based on what she had told him to do, he was furious that he had to pay a settlement fee in the end. The two got into a huge fight, and everything fell apart. The woman had to not only pay the settlement fee to me, but also the mortgage on the house by herself. On top of that, rumors of the affair spread throughout the office and she lost her job as well. After all of her plans were ruined, she was stuck living in an unnecessarily large house with just her child and herself. She lost her job and her family that she thought she would have, and I heard that she was working morning until night from job to job because no company would hire her. In the end, after living a life in poverty and unable to pay the bills, she and her daughter ran away in the middle of the night. As for my ex-husband, he broke up with the woman he was cheating on me with, and since the company knew of the affair, he was fired. In order to pay the child support fees and rent, he desperately looked for a new job, but also had a difficulty finding anybody to hire him. He begged me to delay the child support payments, and he called me multiple times, but I rejected all of them. He had to borrow money from his parents and his relatives, and eventually he was disowned by his family, left all alone to figure it out. I found this out later, but my husband and that woman started their affair while I was being treated for depression, and that they were waiting the entire time for the opportunity to get a divorce. After spending his time without anybody around him, he must have finally realized how awful what he did was, and he sent me a very long apology letter addressed to me and Henry expressing his regret. But no matter how many times he apologized, I, of course, had no intention of forgiving my ex-husband. And after the divorce, I cut off all contact with him. As soon as the divorce went through, I moved back into my parents' house with Henry, and I was able to find a part-time job quickly. I was back on my feet, and we were able to live a stable life. All I could think about is making my son happy, who stood by me the whole time. My name is Kelly. I live with my husband, David, while I work full-time at a company, and every day is very busy. Both my professional and personal life were smooth sailing until this manager who was recently transferred to my company was harassing me at work, and every night I was venting to my husband about it. My husband was worried about me, and he told me that whenever he could finish work early, he would come to the office to pick me up. One day, when my husband came all the way to my office to pick me up after work, my manager coincidentally came out at the same time. Look! That's the only manager that I've been telling you about!
What? Where? You're joking, right?
The moment my husband saw my manager, he was shocked and covered his mouth. What's the matter? Do you know him?
That's my older brother, Richard, that I cut off all ties with years ago!
You're kidding, right? What a coincidence is that? My husband had a brother 10 years older than him, and ever since they were little, he grew up being bullied by him. When he was in high school, his brother tricked David's girlfriend into breaking up with him and dating his brother instead. And after messing around with her and treating the woman terribly, he cut off all ties with him. 10 years have passed since then, and we couldn't believe that his brother was appearing in front of him this way. But if he were to find out that I was my husband's wife, we were certain that he would try to put his hands on me. So David told me to make sure that he didn't find out about it. For that reason, I continued to interact with my brother-in-law simply as my manager. Not knowing anything, my brother-in-law was harassing me and my colleagues around me every day.
Hey, are you the one that made this material? There's a mistake right here.
I'm very sorry, but I don't know what part of it is wrong.
Right here. This number on this graph. Go fix it right now.
I'm very sorry. That's weird. I was fairly certain that I hadn't made a mistake, but because my manager insisted, I decided to fix it as soon as I was told. It was very difficult to collect everybody's materials and recopy everything that was edited, and that day I was stuck working overtime late into the night. I finally finished the corrections and I went to report it to Richard, who was still in the office. I fixed it. Please check it this time for me.
Oh, about that. It seems like the first version was correct, so you didn't need to fix it.
What? You knew that I was working overtime right now to fix this, didn't you? Why didn't you say something sooner?
Hey, you think it's okay to take that tone with your manager? Who do you think you are? If you're going to apologize, I suggest you do so now.
I apologize. I'm going home.
What is with that tone? You've got a bad attitude. I'm your boss, you know that, right? If you're a woman, then you may as well flatter me and try to seduce me. Then maybe I'll look after you.
Who would ever want to?
Now's not too late, you know. Do you want to go to the hotel down the street with me right now? If you want me to forgive you, you should probably do that.
I have a husband. Please don't say something so weird.
If you're not going to listen to what I say, get down on your knees and apologize right now.
I can't entertain this. I'm going home now. See you tomorrow.
Where do you think you're going? Damn it!
When I got home, my husband was worried and he was waiting for me, so I told him everything that happened that day. And then my husband was furious towards his brother, and he told me that if I had any proof of their harassment, that he would report it to the company straight away. Then one day, my husband got a phone call from his parents' house. We found out that after losing the battle with illness, his father had passed away. We quickly packed up and headed straight towards his family home. My father-in-law was the CEO of a major company, and because my company was also partnered with them, my CEO was also in attendance at the funeral. I used the annual leave to take days off of work, and I did whatever I could to support my husband and my mother-in-law who were overwhelmed with grief. And then, when I got back from my days off and returned to the office, all the employees around me were very thoughtful to me. I thanked my colleagues who were being so kind to me, and as I made my way to my desk, I realized that my desk was missing. To my disbelief, while I had taken time off work, Richard had gotten rid of my desk and my chair. This was crossing the line, and I couldn't forgive him for this. So I threw my anger at my brother-in-law, but then the most unbelievable words came flying out of his mouth.
Just because your father-in-law died, you think it's okay to take days off of work? You're being assigned to office cleanup now. I moved your seat to the storage room, so hurry up and get yourself down there.
I was so irritated, and I didn't go to the storage room, but I went straight to the CEO's office. When I relayed word for word what Richard had just said to me, the CEO was furious, and there I decided to reveal to the CEO that my bully manager was actually my brother-in-law. The CEO was shocked, and he called Richard into the office and told me that he would make him apologize to me. When he arrived in the office, Richard bowed towards the CEO and tried to play the good guy. I was even more irritated by the difference in attitude towards me and his team.
Sir, nice to see you. How rare for you to call me in so suddenly. Is there something I can help you with? I can see right through you. Why didn't you attend the funeral of your own father, who was also the CEO of a company that we have been partnered with for so many years? What are you talking about?
I'm actually the wife of your younger brother, so the funeral that I attended was the funeral for your own father, although I'm sure you didn't know that. When he heard that, Richard went completely pale. I am your sister-in-law.
You're lying! Why were you hiding it until now? Nobody told me that my father was dead!
Well, of course they didn't. When your father was alive, you borrowed a large sum of money from him and lost it all. You were disowned by the family, so of course nobody would get in touch with you.
What did you say? Who do you think you are? That's enough! You shut your mouth! Not only did you not attend your own father's funeral, on top of that, you are bullying your subordinates. This is unbelievable! You are suspended until your punishment has been decided.
After he was placed on a suspension from the CEO's direct orders, starting the next day, Richard stopped coming to work. I was feeling really relieved that I could work without any harassment. But when the rest of the team found out about Richard's suspension, they all started raising their voices at once. When all the verbal and sexual harassment that Richard was throwing about came to light, it became a huge internal problem. On top of that, there were more than 10 young female employees who came forward and said that they were forced to have physical relationships with him. The upper management was sued by a number of those people, and they had to pay a very high settlement. The whole issue became a massive ordeal, and Richard was fired while he was still in suspension from the company. On top of losing his income, he was left with a massive settlement fee to pay, and he was at his wit's end. However, my husband had to cut all ties with his brother a long time ago, so we didn't have his phone number nor his address, and he told me that there is no way that we were in danger, so I'm relieved. I had finally regained the peace in my life, and then it was time for my father-in-law 49-day memorial, and I took time off work again to go back to my husband's family house with him. Because Richard was no longer at the company, I was relieved that I wouldn't have to worry about being harassed when going back to work. After the memorial service, I was relaxing at David's family house with him and his mother when suddenly we heard the front door open.
Who is it? Begging in here without even ringing the doorbell.
I wonder who it is. I'll go have a look.
It's kinda scary. Please be careful. As soon as we opened the living room door, there was my brother-in-law standing there. My husband was shocked, and when he asked him what he wanted, Richard pulled out a knife and pointed it towards my husband.
What do you think you're doing? Hand over Dad's inheritance to me! Because of your stupid wife, my life is a disaster!
As soon as I saw that, while my husband was desperately trying to stop his brother, I rushed to call the police. My mother-in-law was more furious than I had ever seen her before, and she was going after Richard many times with a frying pan. He finally gave in after that and dropped the knife on the floor, and as swiftly as we went to take it from him, this time he tried to run away. In perfect timing, the police arrived on the spot and Richard was arrested. Getting fired from work and being sued for a settlement fee. All of that was self-inflicted. But he was resentful of me, and this was the result. After being arrested, the rift between him and his family became even deeper, and Richard didn't step foot near his family home ever again. When the CEO found out about all of this, he said that he was glad that he fired them immediately instead of giving him a chance to cause any more trouble. After discussing it with my husband, I decided to sue Richard for his verbal and sexual harassment, and I also collected a settlement fee. It's not like I could forgive him for that, but when I received the settlement fee from him, perhaps I am heartless, but I did feel a lot better. After all of that, my husband became the heir of his father's company, and he became the CEO of a major company. In order to support my husband in his new role, I decided to quit my job and become a full-time housewife. If everything had gone to plan, they were supposed to leave the company to the eldest son. But in this will, my father-in-law had clearly written that it would be passing the company on to David. While he was still alive, Richard had caused a lot of trouble for his father, and was even disowned by him, so of course this was a given. As for Richard, because he was single and didn't have anybody to rely on and no assets, once he was released from prison, he became homeless for the rest of his life. But I'm sure my husband and I will never have to see Richard ever again in our lives. I was dating a manager at work at the time. My manager's name was Richard, and he was highly rated as being very good at his job. I was only in my second year as a working adult, and there were many things that I was still inadequate in, and Richard helped me many times. Through those interactions, we naturally got closer, and eventually we started dating. Richard was 5 years older than me, but I looked up to him so much that I even thought how lucky I would be to marry him in the future. One night, Richard came over to my house after a work happy hour event, and in his drunken momentum, he tried to have sex with me without protection. Even though I refused, he forced himself onto me. A few moments later, I realized that my period hadn't come. But because I loved him so much, if I did have a baby, I was thinking I wanted to keep it. I took a pregnancy test, and I was able to confirm that I was positive, and I was excited to tell Richard about it, but then...
Stop messing around! I was just playing with you.
That was his response.
Oh, and by the way, I'm actually going to get married to the CEO's daughter. So you and I are over now.
What are you saying? There's no way I can accept that so suddenly.
Why should I care? You're the one that got carried away and serious on your own.
But what are you going to do about the baby? You got drunk and forced yourself onto me. That's why I got pregnant, you know.
You can just get an abortion then. It's still new, so it should be easy, right? I'm about to get married. So if anybody finds out that I got a girl pregnant, it would be a huge problem. Of course, I'll give you the money. So that should be fine, right? How much do you want? 1,000? 2,000? I'll also pay the medical expenses in addition to that. So surely you don't have any complaints.
Richard said that so nonchalantly that everything in front of me turned black. What does he mean he's getting married to the CEO's daughter? What about my existence? What about the baby? At the very least, I had hope for the future that I wanted to get married to him. And yet, in this harsh, one-sided way, and I felt my heart being shattered to the rock bottom of devastation. And foremost, even though he forced himself onto me that night, there was no way that I would be able to destroy that little life that I had growing inside of me. I thought long and hard about it for a while, but my feelings didn't change, and I decided to give birth to the baby. That being said, if I told him that, he would probably continue to come after me to get an abortion. That's why I lied to him, and I told him that I got an abortion. And then Richard's response was,
Well, that's good. And now, you and I can be completely finished.
and he just disappeared like that. After breaking up with him, I thought that I would be able to work at this company until my stomach was so big that I couldn't hide it anymore, and then quit. Of course, I couldn't let Richard find out that I was pregnant, so in the end, I was using the utmost caution. Luckily, my morning sickness wasn't so heavy, so I was able to work normally until my stomach got too big. However, one day, I would overhear the worst conversation in the office.
Richard, you really hit the jackpot. You're marrying up into a wealthy woman. That's right. And with this, my future is set. How did you get the CEO's daughter to fall for you? Well, I've got a good face, and I'm good at my job. So all I had to do was keep flattering the CEO, and it was easy to get his approval and be introduced. You're a bad man, Richard. For a guy like you, it wouldn't have been surprising for you to have a girlfriend already. I'm amazed that you stayed single all this time. Aw, there was a girl that I didn't care about at all. And you know what? She didn't even realize that I was only after her for her body. And then she told me that she was pregnant with my kid. Are you serious? That can't be good. I'm sure she was lying about that anyway. She was probably just trying to get money out of me. That's why I dumped her straight away. Compared to the CEO's daughter, the girl's like a rotten piece of trash anyway.
I couldn't believe my ears, and I felt anger start boiling from the bottom of my body. And so I decided I would get my revenge on him. In reality, I was thinking about submitting my resignation letter and quitting my job. But Richard's wedding date was just announced and everybody in the department was invited. So I decided to extend my resignation so that I could attend. With the wedding already in sight, it seemed like Richard had completely forgotten about me already. In the office, people were congratulating him.
Looks like the day has come. Congratulations! I'm very jealous that you get such a beautiful wife. And now you'll be the heir to the company. That means you'll be the next CEO of this company, doesn't it? I guess so. I'll keep following you, Richard. So when you become CEO, please increase my salary.
I could hear them talking. That is, with no idea that all of this was waiting for him after this was hell. And so the day of the wedding, I was sitting at the same table as my colleagues as the reception began. Richard was sitting next to his beautiful wife and was smiling as though he had gotten everything in the palm of his hand. Actually, a few days before this, I begged the person who was going to be giving the company speech at the wedding and had them let me give the speech in her place. Of course, I said this was going to be a surprise, so I asked her to keep it a secret from the bride and groom, and I was able to get the most perfect opportunity in my hands. After a few speeches had finished, it was finally my turn, and when I stood up from my seat, I could see shock on Richard's face. I stared at that face and I walked up in front of the mic. Richard looked like he wanted to stop me, but he didn't know how without causing concern, so he just stared at me with this uneasy expression. I turned my attention away from Richard and ignored him as I began speaking. Congratulations on your marriage, is what I would like to say, but I can't. That's because before this marriage was announced, I was dating Richard for a very long time. As I began the speech, the venue started to buzz. However, I continued to talk. One day, Richard came to my house drunk, and he forced himself upon me, forcing me to have sex without protection, and as a result, I got pregnant. I had already painted a future with him in my heart, but when I told Richard about this, he suddenly told me that he was going to break up with me. Not only that, but I was told that it was because he was going to get married to the CEO's daughter that I had to abort the child. Richard panicked as he stood up from his seat, and he desperately tried to come up with an excuse.
This isn't true! This woman is lying through her teeth! There's no way she's pregnant! Everything she's saying is nonsense!
Nope, this is the truth. As I said that, I put my hand on my stomach over the baggy dress I was wearing, and so that everyone could see clearly that my stomach was quite big at this point. If you're still going to say that you don't believe me after this, after I give birth to the baby, please go ahead and run a DNA test. Then I saw Richard go completely pale.
But how? You told me that you got an abortion months ago!
He let his mouth slip before he realized, but everybody in the venue had already heard those words. After that was simply chaos. The CEO's daughter started crying, and the CEO lunged at Richard with a fist. The relatives were all throwing daggers, and the entire venue had gone crazy, so I left. And of course, the marriage was immediately called off. I heard that Richard was sued by the CEO for an incredibly high settlement fee, including the full cost of the wedding venue. Of course, there was no way that he would be able to remain in the company, and he was forced to resign straight away. While he was placing his personal belongings into a cardboard box, the female employees could be heard saying,
He's the worst. I didn't think he was such a scumbag.
Seriously, after forcing himself onto her, he told her to abort the baby. I can't believe it. What does he think women are?
Everybody was glaring daggers at him with disgust, and he left the company looking like a zombie. I can imagine he won't be able to work in this town anymore. If I hadn't come across that conversation and overheard him that day, right about now, Richard probably would have had the most amazing life in his hands. However, even if the guy were able to get married, I don't think that woman would have been able to be happy. After that, I formally resigned from the company. Before the day I left, I was called into the CEO's office.
I certainly can't commend you for what you did at the wedding. However, as a father who was also fooled by that guy, I sympathize with you. So please, take this.
And he handed me $5,000 in an envelope.
If there were no talks of Richard getting married to my daughter, perhaps this wouldn't have happened to you either. I can't turn back time, but since you're a single mother who tried to protect their child, I'm rooting for you. I wish you the best of luck.
He said to me. I held back the tears in my eyes and I bowed down to the CEO one last time. After that, I went back to my parents' place, and when I told them everything, they welcomed me with open arms. I no longer had a future with him, but I have no regrets. All I am thinking about is the happy future that I'm going to have with my baby. I have an older sister who drives me to my prenatal checkups each time. I'm currently 8 months pregnant. My sister is married to a successful CEO and he makes a lot of money, so she doesn't need to work. We live in the same neighborhood and my place is about a 10-minute walk from my sister's place. Let me drive you to your prenatal checkups. I have the time and I'd feel better going with you. It was very considerate of my sister to offer to drive me and I gladly accepted. I plan on giving birth at a general hospital and the waiting room there is pretty spacious and I'm usually able to sit down. But when we got to the hospital that day, it was really busy and the waiting room was crowded. When it's crowded like this, my sister would look for an empty seat so that I could sit down at. I'm fine standing, so you sit here. That day, there were no empty seats though. It seemed that the people that had accompanied the patients to the hospital were also sitting down. I saw quite a few pregnant women were standing because there were no available seats.
The hospital is really busy today.
Yes, it is. That day was a Monday, and it was the first weekday after a long weekend. All the people that fell ill over the weekend were at the hospital today. My sister continued to look around to see if there were any open seats. Just then, one seat opened up.
That seat is available now.
I walked over and was about to sit down when a man came into the waiting room. He ran over to the empty seat and sat down. My sister was not happy about this.
Why would he do that? How rude.
It's okay. Other pregnant women are standing too, and I'll be fine.
That man isn't even a patient. If he had any manners, he would offer the seat to someone who needs it.
My sister went over to the man and said,
Excuse me, is it possible for you to give up your seats for my pregnant sister?
The man glared at my sister.
Why me? There are a bunch of other people you can ask.
Well, the seat was empty before you sat down, and my sister was walking over to sit down when you came running and sat down before her.
I don't know what you're talking about.
This waiting room is adjacent to the obstetrics department. Don't you think that it'd be nice for you to offer your seat to a pregnant woman?
Shut up, bitch! Go bother someone else!
I'm fine standing. I don't need to sit down.
It's not right at all. I could see that you've been touching your belly. It means that you have some pain.
Well, yes, a little.
She says she's fine standing, so leave me alone now. I don't need this.
My sister was seriously pissed off at the man in the waiting room. Let's go stand by the wall.
Actually, you do that. I'll wait here to see if another seat opens up. I'll text you when the doctor calls your name.
As I was making my way towards the other side of the room, the wife of the man sitting in the waiting room came out of the examination room.
I'm here. Did you find out if we were having a boy or a girl?
But when his wife saw him sitting down, she got angry and slapped him hard in the face.
Ouch! That hurts! Why did you do that?
Look around you. There are many sick patients and pregnant women standing. You should offer them one of your seats. Why should you be sitting? Look at those two pregnant women standing by the wall. Don't you feel bad for them?
But this seat was open, so I sat down.
Then a small boy came running over.
A woman asked if her pregnant sister could sit down, but this man said no.
The man seemed nervous.
You don't know what you're talking about. Stop making stuff up.
You need to apologize to everyone now. Can't you see that this waiting room is connected to the obstetrics department? If there is no one else standing, you are free to sit down, but when it's crowded like today, you need to offer your seat to someone who needs it. It's so inconsiderate of you to make pregnant women stand while you sit. Now get out of your seat. If you can't behave, go home.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Everyone was staring at the married couple in the waiting room. Then, many other people began to get up from their seats. All the people that didn't really need to sit down lined up against the wall and stood. I wanted to laugh out loud, but I held it in as much as possible. As a result, all the pregnant women that had been standing were able to sit down. The man's wife apologized to everyone in the room.
I'm sorry about my husband's behavior. You need to apologize too. How are you going to be a decent father if you can't think about other people's feelings?
The man who had been so self-righteous before came over to us and said,
I'm sorry that I was rude to you earlier. I hope that you'll be able to forgive me.
After the couple apologized to us, they left the hospital. That woman was so strong.
She was, and thanks to her, you and the other pregnant woman were able to sit down.
I was called in for my prenatal checkup, and after it was over, my sister and I left the hospital to go buy some cute baby items. 1 month later, I was at the hospital again for another checkup, and I saw a pregnant woman from last time. She was sitting down, but her husband was standing by the wall. When she saw my sister and I, she greeted us.
Hello, nice to see you again. I'm sorry about last time.
Hello, thank you for speaking up. Because you did, my sister was able to sit down. It's not crowded today, so I think that your husband is able to sit down next to you, no?
It was a Wednesday, and the hospital wasn't crowded at all. There were a lot of empty seats, but the woman's husband was standing anyway.
He can stand. He needs to pay for his rude behavior. I don't know what he was thinking. He shouldn't have been so selfish. I'm embarrassed that it didn't occur to him that he should give up his seat. We talked about it and decided it's best for him to stand from now on, regardless of whether it's crowded or not.
I see. If you don't mind, can I have your name, please?
I'm Helen.
My name is Ariel, and this is my sister Mia.
Nice to see you both again. Our children are going to be in the same grade. It'd be nice if our paths crossed again sometime. I hope that we bump into each other again soon.
Yes, that'd be nice. It looks like your husband feels bad about what he did. Let's forget it ever happened.
Helen's husband stood quietly in the waiting room. While he saw us looking in his direction, he greeted us with a nervous smile.
Well, I did chew him out pretty badly after he got home from our last prenatal checkup. I think he's learned his lesson.
I see.
We live with my husband's family and he has 2 older sisters. It turns out his sisters had similar experiences at the hospital in the past, and when they found out about what he did to you, they were furious with him.
It's because of assholes like you that women don't feel comfortable getting pregnant and giving birth. If you're going to be selfish, you should wait out in a car. You don't deserve to wait inside the hospital with Helen. You need to grow up if you want to become a decent father.
That's right. The next time you go to the hospital, you shouldn't sit at all, even if there are seats available. That's the least you could do.
After everyone in his family told him how rude he has been, the man learned his lesson. We knew that we shouldn't laugh, but Helen told us the story so vividly that we couldn't help but giggle while listening. After what happened the last time, the hospital put up a roster in the waiting room urging people to give up their seats for sick patients and pregnant women. Now, pregnant women were able to sit down without worrying about asking others to give up their seats. The story about Helen and her husband in the waiting room became pretty famous, and the other husbands of pregnant women made sure to give up their seats to those who needed them.
Please, take my seat. I don't need to be sitting down.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
I was happy to see that people were being kind and compassionate to one another. If Helen hadn't told her husband off, other pregnant women would still be having a hard time getting a seat in the waiting room. It's amazing to think that one action in the right direction can have such a huge impact. It was my final checkup before giving birth, and Helen and her husband were also at the hospital. He was standing in his usual corner, not bothering anybody. I'm sure that he regrets his actions from that day. My husband was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease, and he quit his job because of it. When he was first diagnosed, he looked really ill, and I was worried about him. I was hoping that he'd be able to work again after he recovered, though. But even after he became better, my husband didn't make any effort to find a new job. I have a full-time job, so it was possible for us to live on my income alone. But I was irritated when I came home tired from work every day to see my husband playing games all day long. You look well enough to go back to work. Have you started looking for a new job yet?
I'm worried that I'll get sick as soon as I go back to work. I feel better about my health if I continue to stay home.
I think the stress of my previous job was what made my symptoms worse. I don't want to get another job just to quit again. We have enough money because of your stable income. Do I really need to get a job?
I was disheartened by his lack of motivation. Another thing that bothered me was that my husband didn't do any of the household chores. He had all the time in the world to do them. He wasted his time playing games all day. Even if he saw me cleaning the house after I got home from a full day's work, he didn't offer to help out. How inconsiderate of him. If I asked him to help, he'd do it, but be really proud of himself. I didn't want to have to ask for his help each time, though. I wanted him to take the initiative. One day, I found out that my husband was cheating on me. Unbelievable! Is that why he didn't want to work? I became suspicious because he was withdrawing our money from the bank bit by bit, and I asked him what he had used the money for. I found out later that he had been inviting his lover to our home while I was at work. Some of my neighbors had seen them on several occasions. I was furious with my husband about the affair. This was the last straw. You don't bring any money into the house, and you have the audacity to go out and have an affair with my money?
It's not my fault. I can't work because I'm sick. I have nothing better to do with my time. It's just a fling. Nothing to lose your head over.
I don't believe this. That's the lamest excuse I heard anyone use to justify cheating on their wives. If you don't have anything better to do, you should go out and get a job. If you have the energy to have an affair, you're healthy enough to have a full-time job.
That's not possible. I'm going to get really sick if I start working again. My symptoms get worse if there's any stress in my life. Not working is the best way to treat my illness.
Our conversation was going nowhere. My husband was crazy. If this is how you're going to act, I want a divorce.
You can't do that to me. I just told you that I'm not able to work. What am I supposed to do about money? I'm not divorcing you. You don't know what it feels like to have to deal with this sickness. Do you realize that you're causing me unnecessary stress to me right now?
You stay at home all day long playing video games, and when you're doing nothing, you're wasting your hard-earned money on your lover. You never offer to do the household chores. I don't see why I'm the one that has to do everything for us. I hate my life with you.
I'm the one that's sick. As my wife, isn't it your duty to do everything that you can to make me feel better?
I bet you're not even sick anymore. You're faking it. You're using my money to live life the way you want, and to top it all off, you disrespect me by cheating on me. What you're doing to me is unforgivable.
I don't see why you're getting so worked up about this. As my wife, it's your job to take care of this house. You should be grateful that I help you out when I can. I'm a good husband to you. I don't know what you're complaining about.
I felt nothing but hatred for my husband. He used his illness as an excuse for everything. He was also adamant about not getting a divorce. I didn't know what else to do, so I went to discuss this with my parents-in-law.
It's not our fault. Our son is sick. Please support him in any way that you can.
That's right. As his wife, you should be more supportive. If he can't work due to his illness, you need to step up. He cheated on you because you're not paying enough attention to him. He has needs.
You need to fix things with our son.
I now understand why my husband was the way that he was. He was identical to his parents. I realized that I had gone to the wrong people for advice. I felt hopeless and didn't know who to turn to. I then received a phone call from my uncle. I decided to confide in him about my marital problems and asked for his advice.
That's insane! You don't need to put up with their craziness! I'm gonna help you get out of this marriage. Leave this to me.
I was happy that someone saw how crazy my current situation was. I knew that my husband was incapable of change and that he couldn't be easily persuaded. I hoped that my uncle would be able to help me like he said he would. A few days later, I received a phone call from my father-in-law. He told me that he was coming over to pick up his son. I didn't know what was going on. My father-in-law explained to me that he worked under my uncle and that he didn't want my uncle to be unhappy with him. This was the first time I heard about this, and I was pretty surprised. What a small world. When my uncle found out about how my husband and his parents were treating me, he spoke to my father-in-law right away and scolded him.
I don't understand why your son doesn't work and plays games all day while my niece goes out every day to work hard. Does that seem fair to you? On top of that, he cheated on her. He's a terrible husband. You need to do something about him. He's ruining my niece's life. I also heard that you and your wife encouraged my niece to work harder and take better care of her cheating husband. That's insane! He's your son. You need to get him to take some responsibility. Convince him to divorce my niece. She doesn't need someone like him in her life.
I had no idea that she was your niece. I'll speak to my son right away. I'm sorry for all the inconvenience caused.
My father-in-law came to pick up my husband right away and took him home with him. He even brought over the divorce papers with him so that we could get them signed right away.
You need to sign these and let your wife go. You don't deserve to stay married to her after the way you treated her. I got in a lot of trouble at work because of you. What does your work have to do with anything? I don't want to move out. I like living here.
Well, you don't have a choice. You don't work, and you live off your wife's money. You don't have the right to live here.
I was surprised to see how much my father-in-law's attitude had changed after speaking to my uncle. I guess his job meant that much to him. Now my father-in-law is criticizing everything that's wrong with his son. After the divorce was finalized, I expect you to pay me a decent amount of alimony.
Of course. I'll make sure that my son pays you the amount that you request. Please don't say anything more to your uncle, though. I don't want to ruin my relationship with him any further.
That's up to you and my husband. I'll rely on my uncle again if I need to. After I lost my parents, my uncle raised me like a second father. He's my only family, and I will consult him if necessary. My father-in-law seemed distressed to hear me say that. He was sweating like crazy.
I'll sort this all out. Don't you worry about it. I'll make sure that my son doesn't bother you anymore. And he'll pay you alimony as requested. Why do I have to pay money to her? I didn't do anything wrong. I'm sick. It's not my fault that I can't work. What are you going to do if my symptoms get worse from all the stress?
You need to grow up. You relied on your wife long enough. It's now time for you to stand on your own 2 feet. It's your fault for becoming sick in the first place. And you're not even sick anymore. And why would you cheat on your wife? You're a disgrace!
And then my father-in-law started beating up his own son.
Oh, stop it! You're hurting me! Oh!
In the end, my husband signed the divorce papers and our divorce was finalized. After the divorce, I moved into a new apartment. I didn't want to stay in my old apartment and be reminded of my ex-husband. My uncle found me a good lawyer and I sued both my ex-husband and his lover after finding out who she was. My husband couldn't afford to pay me alimony, so his parents covered the costs, which left them bankrupt.
You need to work hard and pay us back the money that you borrowed from us. I won't let you quit your job until you pay us back the full amount.
You don't know what that will do to me! I'm sick, remember?
No, you're not, you big man baby! This is all your fault, and you need to be punished for it!
My ex-husband was sent to work on a fishing boat where the working conditions were severe and the pay was low. His coworkers were not very nice to him and they abused him daily. It was my ex-husband's fault for getting sick, but the way he acted afterwards was what caused our marriage to fall apart. He deserves to be punished.
I grew up as an only child with a single mother. Apparently, my father cheated on my mom while she was pregnant with me, and that was the reason for the divorce. Because my mom had cut off all ties with her parents, we didn't have any relatives that were supporting our livelihood. And after everything, my mom had mental health problems that made it difficult for her to find work.
We don't have any money.
She would say to me. And I was in a situation where even the clothes that I would wear would be hand-me-downs that we received from the neighbors. And I had to wear those same clothes until they wouldn't fit me anymore. Of course, someone like that was bound to get bullied in school. And I was often targeted throughout elementary school and middle school. On top of that, when I would get home, I was yelled at by my mom, who was mentally unstable. And on really bad days, she would get violent with me, calling it discipline. I spent my childhood in these terrible conditions. And when I graduated middle school, I got a job at a nearby factory. I turned 20 this year, and I'm still working at the same place. But if I'm being honest, I wanted to go to high school. I wanted to go to high school and somehow make up for the disastrous student life I had in elementary and middle school. But my mom said,
High school isn't government-required education, so you don't need to go. If you have time for that, then you need to work and put some money into the house. Have you forgotten who raised you for all these years?
It was true that I'd been living in this house, but I never received any love that made me feel like I was being raised. However, it was true that we didn't have any money. And since I couldn't even buy the uniform to go to high school, in the end, I had to drag my feet out to get a job. Despite all of that, The reason why I've been able to keep working at the factory was because the team leader heard about my situation and had sympathy for me.
Alright, we worked hard in overtime today. I'll treat you to ramen.
He would sometimes pay for my dinner, and during the lunch breaks, the older ladies who were working with me would say,
The old lady is living alone, so the ingredients for my lunch are always left over. That's why I made you one.
and she would bring lunch for me. So that's how I was able to survive. When payday would come around, my mom would say,
You need to hurry up and give me your salary. We're in a really tight situation, you know.
and she would take it all out of my hands. I really wanted to leave this house, but I couldn't even save any money to rent a place. And there was nobody who could be my guarantor, so I couldn't move out. That's why I was grateful to the people at the factory, way more than my own mother. Then one day, I went to the convenience store during my lunch break at work. But then somebody tapped me on the shoulder from behind. You're Thomas, aren't you? Do you remember me? You're Nelson, right? The guy that tapped me on the shoulder was my classmate from middle school, and one of the kids who was always bullying me. Standing next to him was a super beautiful woman. Wow, let me compliment you for remembering. Well, after how much attention I used to give you, of course you wouldn't be able to forget me. As he said that, Nelson put his hand around my neck and forcefully pulled me in closer to him. Having to look at his dirty smile up close, it made me nauseous. At that moment, I noticed that the beautiful woman behind him looked really flustered, and she was staring right at us. She kept flashing her eyes over at me, with her face covered in concern.
Hey, stop that. He clearly doesn't like it.
It's fine, because this guy doesn't know how to stand up for himself. Isn't that right, Thomas? Do you want me to hit you again? But then, at that moment, the woman slapped Nelson across the cheek at full strength.
Hey, you were bullying Thomas? I never heard about this. You said that you knew Thomas, and that's the only reason why I had you come over here with me. But you're the worst.
Nelson stood there in shock that he was slapped in the face by the beautiful woman. But when he came to, he panicked and ran out of the store. What's going on here? But also, how do you know my name?
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
The woman didn't answer my questions, and she quickly ran out of the store as if to get away. I was left standing there alone, not knowing what just happened. A few days later, I found out who that woman was. Suddenly one day, a man that I had never seen before and the woman that I met at the convenience store showed up at my house. My mind froze, wondering how these people knew where I lived and who this man could be. However, as I was standing there frozen at these unexpected visitors, on the complete opposite end,
Why are you here at the house? What do you think you're doing?
my mother was yelling out of shock. I felt like I was the only one who couldn't grasp the situation. When the man opened his mouth,
I'm very sorry for showing up so suddenly. Can we please come in?
what? Sure.
Absolutely not. No. You need to leave.
Is that so? Then let me say it right here. I'm not going to let you have Thomas anymore. All these years, I gave you the money that you asked for, and I've kept my promise to you. But you, did you keep that promise?
Oh, shut up. This is the way that we're living. So leave us alone.
Of course not. What I am asking you is what did you do with the money that I was giving you that was supposed to be for Thomas? I heard that ever since he graduated middle school, he's been working.
School costs money, so what am I supposed to do?
I believe I'd been depositing more than enough money for that.
You're the father, so obviously you're going to send money. But that still wasn't enough.
What? Without thinking, I looked over at the man. When our eyes met, he said,
That's right. I'm your father.
as he smiled warmly over at me. From there, the man explained the situation to me. According to him, he married my mother, and soon after, their first daughter was born. And then she became pregnant with me, but during that time, my mom was having an affair with someone else. When this man found out about it, he decided to get a divorce from my mom, and at that point, they didn't know whose child I was. Knowing that it could be his child, apparently, he tried to gain custody of me. However, my mother rejected this. In the end, the divorce went through, and apparently the man was sending my mother quite a lot of money as child support fees. However, I didn't know about any of that, and that's because my mother had used up all of that money. Well then, who's this woman?
That's right. This is your biological sister. When she found out that you would often show up at that convenience store, she was waiting for the opportunity to talk to you.
Nelson is an underclassman from my college. When I talked about you, he said that he would introduce me to you if I dated him, so if it meant that I could get close to you, I thought it would be fine, but I had no idea that he was doing such awful things to you. I'm truly sorry. I'm sure you didn't want to speak to someone like that again.
I'd completely forgotten about Nelson at that point. It was too shocking for me that suddenly my father and my big sister had showed up at my door. I was still flustered when my father said to me,
Thomas, why don't you come live with your dad and your sister?
Hey, is this some kind of joke? Thomas is going to live with me, so I won't give him to you.
But he ignored my mom's words and continued speaking to me.
You're already 20 years old. You can make your own decisions for yourself, right? Or do you want to stay here?
I desperately shook my head from side to side. I wanted to leave this house for a long time, but I didn't have the money to.
You won't have to worry about that anymore, so you can relax. So what do you want to do, Thomas?
I'm going! I want to live with you guys!
All right, then it's decided.
Hey, you can't make these decisions without me.
After you destroyed his life until now, I'm not going to let you get in the way of Thomas anymore. And also, you will be getting sued for a very high settlement fee very soon.
Huh? And why?
Obviously because you spent all of the money that I've been sending for Thomas on yourself. And I will be collecting back every single penny to return it to Thomas.
Are you kidding me? There's no way that I can return that kind of money.
My mom was throwing a tantrum, but Dad ignored her completely and told me to go gather my things. I later found out that the money that my dad was sending her, my mom was spending on another man. However, my dad hired a lawyer, and he sued her for every penny. Of course, the money that was supposed to be for me, that was being sent to her, stopped coming. So the guy left her, and she was left with nothing but a large debt. In order to pay back the settlement fee, as well as her own rent and her living expenses, she had no choice but to go out and get a job. And now she's stuck being ordered around by people much younger than her, as she works from morning until night. Also, as for what happened to Nelson, who had been bullying me for all these years, it turns out that my big sister had been chosen as Miss University and was quite famous around campus. And when she found out that Nelson had been bullying her little brother, she quickly made it known. Rumors about Nelson made their way around the whole college, and he was met with cold eyes everywhere he went. In the end, he was forced to take a medical leave from school. After that, my dad suggested that I get my GED and go to college. I studied like my life depended on it, and I was able to get accepted into college, and I began my student life. I never could have imagined that at the age of 20, my life would be saved by my dad and my sister. But now, I'm living happier than I've ever been.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.